Hi, everybody. So it is a cold and wet day here in Boston, Massachusetts. So I hope it's a little nicer where you guys are. But unpleasant day outside is a good day to do philosophy, I think. John, how are you?
Fine. You got a new cell phone.
I actually have an old cell phone. My new cell phone
Doesn't work that well as your older one.
not so well. It decided to quit entirely. My new cell phone.
It's alienation from the modern technique.
Yes, or in other words, it died. So it now refuses to turn on. It's a little sad. Never ever buy an LG G5 cell phone.
Oh, you got an LG?
LG G5.
I got an LG G2. It was not so, it was 1 year, but not anymore.
I probably should have asked you beforehand.
Sure.
If I had known.
Sure.
All right. I guess there are midterm examinations going on right now in China, which might explain why not too many people showed up to class today. However, for the 25 which have, it's enough. It's enough. All right. So, everyone ready to begin? Great. Let's do it. All right. So, everybody can see my screen. All right. Bless you, John. Then, on to existentialism. So, as always, we have our outline here. Introduction, why are we discussing the existentialists? History, what is the history of existentialism? What were the historical influence that influenced the existentialists? What did the existentialists believe? What influenced their beliefs? And l'existentialisme et un humanisme, famous work by Jean-Paul Sartre. How did they argue? All right, so let's start with our introduction. So we're nearing the end of our section, how to act or how to live, and the Stoics, Kant, and the utilitarians with how to live were all concerned with how to act. So you recognize the existence or at least the possibility of morality and immorality, and then you deal with it. You figure, how do you act in a moral way? How do you avoid acting in an immoral way? But how to live is broader than just how to act. There are many things that we can do in the world which are neither moral nor immoral. They're choices we have to make, and we need a philosophy to help us cover the choices we make that aren't moral, and they aren't immoral, but they're still important. And this is going to be a lot more complex than what we've covered in the past. So we need a philosophy which covers all the complexity of the modern world, and it covers being. It covers, in other words, existence. Enter existentialism. All right. So why are we talking about existentialism? Because the existentialists taught not just how to act ethically, but how to act meaningfully. So, that being said, let's go on to the history. So the history of existentialism is a bit difficult to write because existentialism really only becomes acknowledged as a movement after the fact. Who we consider existentialists didn't necessarily consider themselves existentialists. But it's easiest to begin with the man who names and formalizes existentialism, Jean-Paul Sartre. This gentleman here with the lazy eye. So, yes, exactly. Good call. Yeah, this is in Peking. So Sartre was born in 1905 in France as the only child to an officer in the French Navy. He studied philosophy and became a philosophy teacher himself. And along the way, he struck up a very famous relationship, really lifelong relationship with Simone de Beauvoir, the feminist philosopher, who's this woman here. This was sort of a legendary relationship, and it became a lot more disreputable, became a lot more infamous once it became known that the two of them prided themselves on their ability to seduce Simone de Beauvoir's pupils, which we can cover ethics later in this class. Adventures in modern technology. All right. So, what? All right. I'll start from. Which point should I start from? After World War II? This point? Feminist relationship. Oh man.
Okay.
Well, that's not great. All right, so we were out for a little bit. So yeah, in the future, gotta watch for the red line here. So, anyways, so yeah, he struck up a relationship with Simone de Beauvoir, famous feminist philosopher, and this relationship fell into disrepute, became infamous or bad, once it was known that Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir seduced Simone de Beauvoir's pupils, so her students. In 1939, Sartre was drafted into the French army as a meteorologist, so helped predict the weather. World War II, captured as a prisoner of war, released after 9 months, began to write fiction and plays along with philosophy. After World War II, he became a Marxist, not a communist, but a Marxist, and politically active, along the way earning the enmity or the hatred of a French far-right paramilitary group, carried out 2 bomb attacks on him. This is the aftermath of one of them, so you can tell it was a pretty serious bomb attack. Luckily, no one was injured. In 1964, he made history by becoming the first person to decline the Nobel Prize in Literature. By the way, in terms of contemporary news, it sort of looks like Bob Dylan will be the next one.
He's coming there.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's confirmed.
Because he declined the Nobel Prize in Literature because he didn't want to take sides in the conflict between the East and the West. His Nobel Prize was seen as a Western prize. And finally, he died in 1980 in Paris. So, in the meantime, Sartre's existentialism, his philosophy, became this catch-all phrase for a whole movement coming out of France. And the most important other person in existentialism, as it became known, was Albert Camus, who's this gentleman here, who is famously the most handsome philosopher, which I think is a reputation well earned. Camus was born in 1913 in French Algeria to a poor French family. I don't know if you guys know about Algeria, country in Africa, and we'll cover its history of France in a little bit. Camus studied philosophy and worked odd jobs before becoming a journalist and an agitator for Algerian independence. So he wanted the Algerians to get their independence, and this was the same position that Sartre took eventually, and that got Sartre bombed. So it was a dangerous position to have. In World War II, Camus became a journalist for the French resistance against the Nazis. So this was a pretty brave act. And then after World War II, he became a literary figure. He worked for human rights, just like Sartre. In 1957, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, just like Sartre. And then tragically, 3 years later, he died in a car crash in 1960. And this is a photo of his funeral. So, in brief, the history of existentialism was a literary and philosophical movement out of France. And the literary part is actually quite important, although we won't cover it at all. There's really some great literature that comes out of this. And the two great leaders of existentialism in France are Sartre and Camus. All right. So I know I went through that a little fast, everyone, but I think it should be pretty clear. So, next up, historical background. What were the historical forces that influenced the existentialists? So, much like utilitarianism, which was a philosophy for 19th century England in an age of empires and science, existentialism became famous when it did because of the events that were happening in the world. So existentialism was a 20th century philosophy for a time of destruction. So existentialism focuses on death and focuses on a search for meaning. And this makes it an excellent wartime philosophy. The most important impact on existentialism was World War II. But as we've seen, the struggle for Algerian independence was a major impact on later existentialism as well, especially because Algerian independence has a lot of import for France, which is where existentialism comes out of in the 20th century. All right. I think everything's clear so far, right? Okay, cool, good. So, World War II. As I've said quite a few times, World War II is a huge subject. We'd probably need a whole course to cover it, and we don't have a whole course to cover it. But let's talk about it from a French perspective. So at the start of World War II, France hadn't yet really recovered from World War I. So World War I ended in 1918, just about 20 years prior, and 75% of their active forces were killed or injured. That's a huge number. That means 3/4 of, given that they drafted pretty much all the young men in France, that means 3/4 of, then 20-year-olds, now 40-year-olds were killed or injured. It's a huge number. And then World War II went really, really badly for the French. The Germans dominated them militarily, and Paris, France's capital city, was occupied. So here are Nazi soldiers in Paris. This is Nazi soldiers with their famous goose step. These are Nazi soldiers marching down. I'm not sure which street this is, but this is one of the main streets in Paris. So this is really, you can imagine this is traumatic. The French are a proud people, and here's the Germans, holding parades down their streets. So the Germans didn't actually treat the French as badly as they did other occupied countries like Poland or the parts of Russia which they occupied. It was still not fun to live under the Nazis, as you might imagine, and it was really bad for undesirables. So, for instance, 1/4 of all Jews in France died. So by the end of World War II, France was humiliated, exhausted, and in very poor shape. So this is a street in Paris after World War II. As you can tell, it's seen better days. They didn't build it to look like this. All right, that's World War II. Let's cover Algerian independence. So Algerian independence, so Algeria was France's oldest and most dear colony. So France, a couple hundred years prior, had set up colonies there, had sent people there. And so it was the only colony legally considered a part of France. So France considered it a part of themselves. But by the end of World War II, things got a little crazy. So there was a push by the native Muslims of Algeria, because it's in Africa, so the natives were Muslim, and they wanted to be considered as equals with the French Christian Algerians. So these would be people who were ethnically French and religiously Christian. The French Christian Algerians violently disagreed. They were backed by the French army. So to bring it back to existentialism, Camus' parents were French Christian Algerians who were also known as pieds noirs, which literally means black feet. That was the term for French Christian Algerians. No one knows why they're called black feet, but that was the name for them. So the push for equality by the Muslim Algerians turned into a push for independence by the Muslim Algerians, which turned into a civil war. So there was violence and atrocities on both sides, mostly in Algeria, a little bit in France, and there was torture, there was assassinations, there were bombings, and the war ended with Algerian independence and a mass evacuation of French and those who had assisted the French to France. So these are some native Algerians at the beginning of the conflict. You guys might be able to understand this. Vote pour l'indépendance. Vote for independence. So, in the meanwhile, while this whole civil war was going on, the war was divided. War divided the intellectuals of France. Most people were on the side of the Algerians and believed that France didn't have the moral right to use force to keep Algeria as a colony. Camus, although he supported Algerian independence, wouldn't take sides in the civil war, and both sides hated him for it. Hated him for not taking sides about who was right. So let's talk about the historical influence on existentialism here. So it's really interesting to compare it to the utilitarians. So the utilitarians were really sure there was a right and a wrong in the world. They could use their scientific reasoning to figure it out. The existentialists weren't really sure of anything. Their world had been turned completely upside down. So science and technology had killed unprecedented numbers of people. Morality seemed really uncertain in the face of these brutal new regimes, and a new world order was on the rise, in which the world would be pretty much divided between American and Soviet spheres of influence. A lot of things have changed. And the reason why I put this picture here, which John, you might recognize, you might not, is it's sort of similar in a lot of ways to the impact that World War II has on China. A lot of assumptions that were had about the world before the war really get turned completely upside down. And the country as a whole needs to react to it. They need to figure out, what do we believe and what is true about the world in an ethical sense? And it's really a difficult question. So Descartes tore thinking down to its roots to build it back up. He questioned everything that he knew. Existentialists were going to do the same thing. They tore down ethics, morality, and how to live. All right. That's the historical background. Existentialism was born from the trauma of World War II and Algerian independence. All right, cool. On to philosophy. So, John, I'll be needing you for translations here, as always. So philosophy, we're going to mostly stick with Sartre's ideas to keep things simple and straightforward. There are other existentialists, most notably Camus, but we're mostly just going to do Sartre. So, existentialism is about existence at its core. Existentialism, existence, existence. So the most foundational concept in existentialism is existence precedes essence, or that humans exist as something before we exist as a type of something. So precedes comes before. Essence will make something part of a category. So we exist before we're part of any sort of category. So we're like a blank canvas. It's not yet determined what this canvas will be used for. So according to Sartre, humans are unlike anything else because our qualities do not determine what we are used for or how we should be used. We determine that for ourselves. So tied into that is the idea that our qualities can't determine what we are. So if you want to understand what a rock is, you can understand it if someone tells you all of its qualities. Someone tells you it's 2 kilograms, it's shaped like a square, it's gray, maybe it's flaky. But you can't understand a human the same way because there's an element of transcendence. Because humans aren't just part of their qualities, they also have something in them of the possibility of becoming something else. So, in terms of commentary on this, you have to assume that this element of transcendence is present in the person while you're talking about them. So, in one sense, it's sort of a quality. And also, it does sort of seem like you could describe other things with this element of transcendence. For example, you could describe a caterpillar as being able to become a butterfly. So it does sort of seem like Sartre's distinction that this is the only humans are the only ones like this seems a little extreme, but that's what he says. So because we can't just be defined by our being, but also by our possibilities, we don't only exist in the world, but to some extent we are revealed by the world, and so we are inseparable of it. So think of this canvas. So if you're an artist, you have an infinite number of possibilities for what to paint. Now, after the only way you can understand the possibilities of what could have been painted is by what was painted. And that's also how you understand the artist. So you don't know every way based on what painting actually came out, but you understand the artist better, and you understand what could have come out better by looking at what was actually painted. So this is the same thing. We're revealed in the world. Just as the artist is revealed in his painting, just as the possibilities are revealed in his painting, humans are revealed in the world. So this is less, I would say, rigorous than what we've seen before. This is sort of ethical, like, you can be anything you want to be, and it's sort of metaphysical, like what the nature of reality actually is, and that's a bit frustrating depending on how you approach philosophy, and depending on how you debate philosophy. So this is a different sort of feeling to philosophy, which we'll talk about more. All right, John.
OK，现在我们开始谈就是存在主义的第一个重要的思想，就是所谓的存在先于本质。我们从后往回讲，因为大家一定很奇怪，为什么我们在一个伦理学的课上开始大谈存在，大谈一个形而上学的问题。当然，在萨特那里，形而上学的问题对萨特来说，已经和人的伦理的问题密不可分。然后我们待会儿会看到，就是萨特是怎么样从存在的概念中发展出一系列的伦理学的概念。那么所谓存在先于本质呢，就是简单的说，就是说什么是本质？本质是定义一个东西它是其所是的东西。比如说一把刀，刀的本质是什么？它就是为了砍东西而制造的一个工具，或者一个石头，它是一个有形状、有颜色，可以做一定事情，可以有一定重量的这样子一个物体。但是对于萨特来说，就是人是不可能被这样的所谓的特征，或者说即便是本质的特征所定义。人总是首先是存在的，然后在存在的过程中不断对可能性开放的一个个体，所以呢，任何的特质都不能穷尽人这个概念的本身。要理解人，就一定要有一个超验的维度，这个维度呢就是存在的维度。然后关于存在的概念呢，萨特在下面的课中会继续分布。然后所以大家记住，存在先于本质。事实上，本质是很不重要的东西。 到目前为止，大家有问题吗？说得清楚吗？
All right. Looks like people are pretty good right now. So let's continue. So alienation. So we are revealed in the world, like a painter is revealed in his painting. But the world is strange to us. So it's not some system that we're a part of, but it's some strange system that affects us and that we affect. This is the first cause of alienation, or feeling like a stranger. So this lion sees her reflection in the pool. She's not part of the pool, and it's strange to her. That's why she's growling at it. So as long as we only look at things from our perspective, then we just have an idea of ourselves as our own selves. We look out at the world, and that's our idea of ourselves, from the view from inside your head. But then once we look at ourselves from other people's perspective, we realize we're revealed in their perspective. So there's a part of us which is alien to us. So you realize that there's something about you, uniquely about you, that you can only tell by looking at yourself from someone else's perspective. And so the only way you can tell a certain part of yourself is in a stranger's perspective. So this is another cause of alienation. Part of you is within a stranger. So most of the ways in which we exist are really typical examples of rule following. So we drive like everyone else, eat like everyone else, sleep like everyone else. So in that sense, our reflections in the world are similar to everyone else. So our individuality is lost. So in this alien world, in which we are revealed in other people and lost in a crowd, how do we exist as individuals? And I'm blanking on this guy's name right now, but this is a famous Chinese artist who I think his work betrays a lot of the same ideas. You know, everyone has the same smiling face. Where is the
I'm checking the name.
individuality? All right. If anyone can remember the name of this guy, put it in the chat. Otherwise, John can also look it up. All right. Nothing? All right. So, translation.
所以说就谈到了，我们现在谈到了一个异化的概念。所谓异化呢，就是说，其实简单理解就是像 Trevor 刚才说的，就是我们在这个世界上活着，大多数时候我们自觉的或者不自觉的在服从这个社会给的一些规范，比如说我们一天应该吃3餐，我们应该不要介入别人的家庭，我们应该有种种这样的道德。但是呢，在服从这一切的规则的时候，我们其实并没有作为一个非常独立的个体存在着。那对于萨特来说，这是一个很简单的一个现象，它可以用人的异化来进行表达。什么叫人的异化呢？就是人本来是一个存在的个体，但是呢，如果呢人靠这样子的种种的特征，比如说我是一个道德的人，我是一个服从规则的人，通过这样特征活着的时候，他就在这样的特征中丧失了自己的本质，某种意义上也丧失了个体。这种情况呢，萨特就把它叫做异化。所以其实和 Marxist alienation is not so far from the concept of alienation of Marx.
Yeah, that's true. Which it makes sense. Sartre was a Marxist. Also, we have a
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Genius.
So yeah, I actually first found this artist's work in a museum at Princeton, actually.
Oh.
So his fame has reached across the ocean. All right. So let's talk about authenticity. So according to Sartre, we exist as individuals by choosing what we do. The only way to be an individual is by choosing. We can't be Kant. We can't be, Bentham, the utilitarian, and follow rules. Instead, we have to actively choose during each moral choice and during each life choice. So couple commentaries on this. One is this does seem impractical, choosing during each moral choice and during each life choice. But it's not that much more impractical than Kant's ethics or Bentham's ethics, and Sartre would probably just say, "Well, try your best." But at the same time, it also seems like it'd collapse under extreme skepticism. Like we have to actively choose to wear clothes each morning rather than going naked to be an individual. So here we have another comic from one of my favorite comics of all time, Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin here says every day it's the same old thing, but not today. And he walks out the door naked. His mom grabs him and he says, everybody's a slave to routine. So yeah, it does seem like it's a little. It doesn't seem like we really have to choose all the time, and we should be a little more selective about what exactly we choose. But this is what Sartre gives us. John, what do you think? Translation or?
Yeah,所以这里 Trevor 谈到了本真性的问题，就是我们什么时候才算是在做一个真正的选择？那同样回到刚才异化的问题，就是在我们不接受这个世界给我们的规范，做我们自己的做一个自己的非常原初的一个所谓生存性的决定的时候，在这个情况下，然后呢才算是触及到了原初性这个概念的本质，所以其实也蛮好理解的，就是要大家理解原初的一个选择，而非一个外来的或者一个学习到的选择。
All right. So there are certain points in the world where we realize we are free and that we are alone. We are not defined by our roles, and the world is not made for us. This is when we are experiencing anxiety and we realize life's absurdity. Everything exists in itself, not for us. So here, realize you're free, you're alone. You're not defined by your role. You're not a student. That's not who you are in the same way that a dog is a dog or a rock is a rock. You also realize the world's not made for you. You just came into existence and you'll die. And the world was here before you, was here while you lived, and will be here afterwards. So when this happens, you experience anxiety because you realize life's absurdity. And absurdity here is a pretty specific existentialist word. So everything exists on its own without us. Nothing exists for us. This is how life truly is, but it's frightening, which is why we don't see life this way most of the time. It's too frightening for us to see it this way. So at these points, when we realize we are free, we can do anything that we want, and that we are alone, and that we have been born alone, and that we'll die alone, we also have to realize that we're naturally nothing. There's nothing inherent in us. We have to make ourselves be things. Each day we have to make ourselves be a student or a doctor or a lawyer or a philosophy teacher. And we'll keep making ourselves do things or be things until we die. And then at that point, we'll actually be nothing. So life is a sort of self-creation here. And so one thing about existentialism, which again is sort of, I almost want to say it's more in the continental tradition, is that there are these big words here. There's freedom, there's nothing,
Sure.
and it's not precise. It's not someone like Bertrand Russell or even Wittgenstein wouldn't have been quite so casual about using these big words without carefully saying exactly what they mean. But someone like Sartre is much more okay with saying freedom or nothing and not defining them precisely. It's very much a feeling to it rather than a precise philosophical definition.
That's existentialism.
Yeah. Yep, true. So the process of making ourselves be things is done continually. We can never determine ourselves to be something and forget about it. We have to actively do it each day. We are condemned to freedom. So you can never decide one day that you're a student and just be a student and that's it. Each day you have to actively be a student. So each day you have to get into the subway or into your car and go to school. And you have to sit in class and you have to take notes. If you don't do that, nothing will happen. You just won't learn. You won't be a student that day. So that's why you're condemned to freedom. And here I have a sand sculpture, which I thought was pretty apropos of a sculptor making himself. All right.
所以我们在这里谈到了一个概念，就是烦 anxiety 或者说担忧。对于萨特来说，他刚才我们如果还记得的话，提到了所谓的本真的选择，或者说生存的领域。在这个领域里，我们做每个选择都是为了自己，都是或者说选择自己为了自己做出选择。那和我们或者说和萨特谈的另外一套生活习惯，就是生活在这个世界中，然后呢觉得这个世界呢是互相依存的一个存在，或者说呢是互相提供规范的一个存在，是非常对立的。就好像我们每天我们需要有人帮助，我们觉得有人鼓励是好的，我们在朋友圈上看很多赞，心里很高兴。对于萨特来说，这都是废话，这都是完全虚伪的东西。然后你把这些所谓的依赖的，所谓的从别人那里得到的一些规范、赞许、鼓励，把这些东西都抛弃，你会发现，其实这个世界每个决定或者说每个东西它的存在，都和你其实并没有意义上的联系，所有的意义某种意义上都是自己的编织。那在意识到这一点的时候，并且能够进行负责、有效的选择或者本真的选择的时候，人也会同时有一种非常强烈的孤单感，因为确实什么都不能帮助你在你真正做一个选择的时候，这种孤单感对于萨特来说，他把它叫做烦。
All right. So we have a question here from Denise. What does it matter for Sartre's existentialism to look at ourselves from others' perspective? Well, remember, Sartre's existentialism is all about being an individual. You make yourself each day, right? And you determine who you are. So what is for Sartre, there's something about that, which is strange when you think part of how you can tell what you are is from what others see you as. So, for instance, have you ever had a friend tell you something like, when you're like nervous, you can be really mean or something like that. Like, you were very anxious about a test the other day, and when I was trying to be nice to you, you were really mean to me. And you said, "Oh, I didn't even realize I was so anxious about the test that I didn't think about how mean I was being to you." Um, so in that sense, suddenly you realize you're revealed in someone else's perspective. There's some aspect of your personality that you had no idea about, and it's revealed in someone else's perspective. So that's a pretty for someone focused on individualism, on creating yourself. It's pretty significant that something about yourself, about what you've created, you can't tell by yourself. You need other people. You need someone else's perspective. So,
But it's against that.
what?
It's against that what you mentioned.
In what sense?
Yeah, you are going to formulate some part of your personality, and you have to depend on someone else's judgment or criterion or such perspective from the other person. So you are actually dependent on them. For Sartre, it's nothing right here. You should define yourself, and
Well,
you are carving yourself out from nothingness.
yeah, but he does say we're revealed in others' perspective, though. So we carve ourselves out. We determine ourselves.
Yeah, I understand.
But it's our personality here, our impact on others is only revealed from others' perspective.
I see. But for him, it's only good to review yourself, not good to define yourself through the other's perspective.
Yeah, I would say a pretty important part of Sartre's philosophy and of existentialism in general is that we define ourselves through our actions and through our impact on the world.
Choices.
Yeah, choices. Exactly. So to that extent, you have to say what are your interactions with others in terms of authentic choices and how that reveals yourself. So yeah, I do agree. You have to drill down pretty closely for the difference between revealing yourself in someone else's perspective and defining yourself in someone else's perspective. I think it's a case of sort of like what your reaction is. Are you suddenly realizing that this is an element of yourself that you've never known, or are you like now defining yourself on what they've said?
Yeah. I think it's very connected to the second question. So, what is absurdity? Yeah, you said that the existence is an absurd thing.
Yeah.
But in which sense? I mean, in others' eyes or in your own eyes, or what is absurd here?
I think Sartre is saying absurdity in a absurdity is something that applies to everyone, but they realize for themselves. So you're alone on this hilltop, and you realize this is an entire world. These are stars, these are trees, this is grass,
Yeah.
and all of this is not for you. It existed before you, and it exists after you. Um, and that is, in Sartre's opinion, that's the absurdity.
Yeah.
And then you look at yourself and you realize, what am I?
I'm just an accident.
I'm a cosmic accident, exactly. So Camus has the reason why Camus is identified as an existentialist. For any of you who were in my class over the summer, we looked at Camus' myth of Sisyphus. That he has a lot of the same issues of life's absurdity. Of I'm some sort of cosmic accident. Nothing I do matters.
So Sartre would go against Facebook quite a lot. you say that, okay, absurdity is the actual being. But if you turn out to the your friends to find more likes,
Yeah, that's definitely not authentic. Yes, and I definitely think he'd think Facebook is a waste of time. Although somehow I feel like he'd still be on it and use it a lot, and he would just hate it.
Sure. Good.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So let's go on to ethics as our last thing. So ethics, as you might imagine, is a different sort of concern for Sartre than it has been for anyone else who we've talked about before. Um, so Sartre doesn't believe in absolute ethics. You know, this is wrong, this is right. He claims that ethics are meaningful based on the choices you've already made in your life. So what's good and what's bad depends on who you've chosen yourself to be. A saint, a sinner, a rule follower. You know, here we have this woman who's chosen herself to be a nun, and for her, you know, this bikini is bad, and this woman has chosen herself to be, well, who knows, some sort of person who obviously bikinis are morally defensible. So I don't think this is surprising given the rest of his philosophy, but it certainly seems morally bankrupt. Like it doesn't seem like a solid ethical system, and it also seems not really defendable on a practical level. So I have sort of a silly example for this. Um, so if we can think of some sort of person um, who thought it was okay to go around hitting babies, so he would just like walk around the park and he'd see a mom who left the baby unattended and he'd just slap it in the face. Uh, you know, maybe he could have even defined himself as the baby hitter. You know, that's his goal in life, and he's like, what's good in my life is when I hit babies randomly. Um, so I suppose we could accept that he saw himself as good, but that doesn't seem like a particularly like useful thing to say. Really, we'd say you're a bad person, you hit babies, you should be in jail, and I don't think Sartre would object. You know, so whether or not he's defined himself as the baby hitter or not, it's still a pretty bad thing that he's going around hitting babies.
At least he's made his own authentic choice.
Exactly. So that's the problem, right? Is that his authentic choice is he hits babies, and you can tell it's authentic because no one else is doing that. But it does seem like there's some sort of limit here of the goodness of an authentic choice.
Yeah.
All right, translation.
Yeah,所以对，就是对于萨特来说，他当然是一个伦理学的一个相对主义者。对于他来说，没有一个伦理学的一个绝对的标准或者说背景。那一切的选择呢，都是建立在你之前的经验之上，都是在当下的一个非常spontaneous 的非常自发的一个抉择，它不会像康德啊，不会像之前的哲学家那样子有一个普世化的公式可循。大家都清楚了吗
All right, cool. So to sum up Sartre's philosophy, alienation, authenticity, and anxiety. Existence precedes essence. Um, so let's cover Denise's question and then go on break. So the Sartre denied Kant's antinomy about free will without reasoning, and he thinks there's no determination but just free will without reasoning. Sartre is not super worried about free will and determination in the same way that someone like Kant is. It makes, yeah, existentialism sidesteps a lot of these big questions. Kant said it's an antinomy. Aquinas and Aristotle are arguing about like the nature of the world, and Sartre just sidesteps it and says, "Yeah, sure, we have free will. Like this isn't something I'm super concerned about." Yeah. All right. Cool. So it's 9:59. So 5-minute break. I'll see you all back here at 10:04, and we'll go to the background to existentialism, and then read some existentialist philosophy. So yeah, see all you guys at 10:04. Hello.
Hi.
All right, so in 1 minute before class starts again, are there any questions about what we've covered, about other things? Um, or is everyone good? Everyone wondering about the absurdity of existence, meaninglessness, life. Well,
I think this really is a good question to compare Sartre with Kant. Yeah, I think he retains the structure of the free will of Kant, that the free will is something spontaneous, without reasoning, without reflection, without taking over the moral standards, even or imposed by the world. But I think somehow Sartre would put the question a bit back. He would say not only there is a free reason, but free will, but there is also another spontaneous will behind the free will and the reasoning. Actually, you can choose to be free. You can choose to be, to be able to make a free or authentic choice instead of following some rule. It's actually a second order.
interesting. So, you think he's uh,
Yeah, if you choose to go out naked.
choose to be free. Do you think he's? I would. Doesn't he say that everyone is making a choice though? Even if you don't think you're making a choice, you're still making that choice.
Yeah, it's ambivalent. I would think that he would, of course, respectively say that, yeah, it's not a real choice you are making. Yeah, yes, you are. Everybody's making some choice, but some choices are authentic. They are the real choice, and some choices are just, half choice.
Elitism. The elitism of free will. So is existentialism popular in young people? Yeah, very much so.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah. So when I first discovered existentialism, I was maybe 14, 15, and it was like,
oh, so mature.
Yeah, but it was like very much like, this is, someone who's articulated everything that I've been feeling. So existentialism, actually, I was really, really impressed by when I was 14, 15. I think less impressed now.
Sure.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a similar thing.
I was a bit late. I first read the existentialism in the age of 20, 21. But now I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So the Nazis, I mean, the Nazis were followers of Nietzsche, but they didn't. It was a perverted version of Nietzsche. So they didn't. They were using Nietzsche very much to their own ends. So I wouldn't say there is any particularly strong philosophical background behind the Nazis, and there wasn't really a strong philosophical background behind fascism in general, which we discussed when we talked about Popper. They had very strong beliefs, and they were willing to defend them violently, but they didn't really have great philosophical reasoning behind their beliefs. But I think they didn't really feel like they needed to. That wasn't something that super concerned the Nazis. So next we're discussing Sophie's Choice, which have you ever heard of that book? No?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sophie's Choice. Never mind. Okay. It was a literary pun. So my choice is mine, even against the social convention. What's different from freedomism? So yeah, I think what John and I keep mentioning is there is a very important idea in existentialism of the authentic choice of, like, when you're choosing yourself, when you're creating yourself, choosing each day, this is what I'm going to do. You have to make, like, sort of this authentic choice, which is like really grappling with the weight of the world, grappling with everything that comes along with your ideas, and finally say, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. So against the, and so even Sartre did wear clothes in appropriate situations, so he wasn't just being contrary. You know, he didn't show up naked to things just to be like, aha, I've made a choice. But I think Sartre would have argued that he had legitimately thought about rationales for wearing clothes and not wearing clothes and decided to wear clothes, that he wasn't wearing clothes just because everyone else wore clothes. That's what Sartre would have said. But Sartre would have said, Sartre would have disagreed with you, Denise. Sartre would have said, no, we are really free. He had no doubts about that. And you might argue based on other philosophers that we don't know that, which is a legitimate position in my point of view. But Sartre would have said, like, nah, we're free. We're free. All right. Cool. So let us begin again. All right. Onward, the Light Brigade. All right. So everyone can see my screen. Great. So let's talk about background to philosophy. So the two philosophers who have the most impact on existentialism and are actually defined as proto-existentialists. So, you know, existentialists before existentialism are Kierkegaard and Nietzsche. So this is Kierkegaard here, this is Nietzsche here. So Søren Kierkegaard was a 19th century Danish philosopher. He was a Christian, and he took Christianity really, really seriously. This was a really important thing for Kierkegaard. So Kierkegaard was interested in the religious experience. And for him, this is emblemized by the point at which Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac, which is this scene here. And I know probably most of you aren't super familiar with the Bible, so just to relay the story briefly. So Abraham is the first person God approaches to really reveal his existence and to say start Judaism and whatever. And the way that God does this is quite strange in the Bible. God sends an angel to Abraham who tells Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, to prove his faith in God. And the weird thing about this story is that the angel is in the form of like a normal person. And so Abraham has to make this leap of faith. He has to say, this is a representative of God, and this is, the God who created the universe, and whatever is telling me to sacrifice my son, and I will do that. And so Abraham makes this leap of faith. He puts all his faith in God, and just as he's about to sacrifice Isaac, God stops him and says, sacrifice a ram instead. So Abraham does that, and Isaac walks away, presumably quite traumatized. And this is our ram here that Abraham sacrifices instead. So Kierkegaard argues that normal philosophy says our actions become meaningful when they are moral, and they obey a moral law. However, Kierkegaard points out that, ironically, when we're obeying a moral law, our actions are not individual, because moral laws are universal. They should apply to us in all cases. So meaningful here is, some higher purpose, and Kierkegaard says it's strange. We're saying it's from some higher purpose when we're acting in the way that we're told to act. So that seems strange to Kierkegaard.
Okay.
I'll finish and then we can.
I cannot wait already.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. All right. So Kierkegaard says that Abraham's attempted sacrifice of Isaac, on the other hand, is individual and supremely meaningful. So God is commanding Abraham directly. And it's individual because, Abraham is sacrificing his only son. This is a pretty big deal. So in Kierkegaard's terms, Abraham chooses to become a knight of faith. So that's a knight, like this sort of guy, armor, lance. So Abraham, at this point, he trusts in God. He trusts in God's cruel demand, sacrifice your only son, and chooses against all reason to obey this cruel demand. And this is individual because it's contrasted to the crowd. Abraham's neighbors, his friends, his family, who do obey these normal moral codes and would urge Abraham not to follow God's demand. So a Christian for Kierkegaard is someone who actively chooses to believe a subjective truth, so something that's not true in the world, true from your perspective only, and makes meaningful choices which are not along with the crowd. All right, John, please translate.
I can translate for 3 days. So 所以他就是萨特的那个一个很重要的思想先驱，当然是19世纪的丹麦的神学家，但是Kierkegaard 在柏林学习，很重要的神学家，他对神学中的圣权主义的推进起到很大的作用。这里提到了亚伯拉罕杀子的故事，大家可能有兴趣，这是圣经里面不多的好故事之一。在创世纪22章，当神找到了亚伯拉罕，没有任何原因的让亚伯拉罕杀掉他的独生子，当时因为另一个孩子已经被赶出家门，杀了亚伯拉罕的最喜欢的孩子吧，叫 Isaac。那亚伯拉罕带着 Isaac 到了山上，完全没有告诉 Isaac 要做什么，也完全没有告诉他的仆人要做什么。当 Isaac 在问到亚伯拉罕父亲，我们的柴火都准备好了，但是羔羊在哪里的时候，亚伯拉罕只轻描淡写的说神会照顾一切的。当然最后一刻天使出现，并且挽救了亚伯拉罕的孩子 Isaac。但是这个故事对于Kierkegaard 来说，有一个非常重要的有一个非常重要的暗示，就是或者会一个非常重要的道理，就是亚伯拉罕完全知道杀孩子这件事情是完全不道德的，即便在一神教，即便在亚威信仰的体系中，杀孩子于情于理于整个社会的舆论于神的眼光看来都是非常不合理的事情，并且以撒知道，他的妻子知道，他的仆人一定也知道这件事情。为什么亚伯拉罕要这样干？对于Kierkegaard 来说 ，Kierkegaard 有好几个关于这一段圣经的注释。对于他来说，其实亚伯拉罕也知道这一切不对，但是当选择来的时候，神的命令放在人的面前，他需要闭上眼睛，做一个他心中认为那个是对的那种选择。这种选择的结构，对于 Kierkegaard 来说，对于萨特来说，都很重要。就是你要闭上眼睛，有时候人生需要做一个用齐克果的话来说是致命一跃的选择。这种选择有时候并没有对错可言，它只是你做出的选择，但是有时候它需要你太多的勇气。这样一个很好的故事和很好的 commentary， 大家听明白了吗？或者我觉得大家肯定有很多问题。
Yeah. What does Diabla mean?
Abraham.
Oh, I've never heard a word like that in Chinese before.
Oh, 亚伯拉。
Yeah. It's an interesting.
Yeah, it's just literation only.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sense
no question.
Yeah.
Too shocked, are you?
Yeah. Before we go on, fun fact. So.
Is it about free choice? Yeah.
God, yeah. So God tells Abraham, sacrifice your son, and God doesn't say sacrifice your son and I will reward you. God doesn't say sacrifice your son or else I will punish you. God just says sacrifice your son, and that's it. So Abraham has to choose to place his faith in God by doing that. And there's no reason for him to do that, but Abraham chooses to anyways. So that's I think really the point of all this, and why Kierkegaard says Abraham is a knight of faith. So here's my fun fact. As long as we're talking about Christianity, I learned this the other day. So the Inuits who live in far north in the Arctic, when Christian missionaries first came to them, they needed to translate the Lord's Prayer. So give us this day our daily bread.
Yeah.
But they don't have any word for bread. So do you know what they translated it as?
I don't know.
It's give us each day our daily seal meat. So meat from a seal. So yeah, fun fact of the day. All right. So let's talk about Nietzsche. So weirdly enough, one proto-existentialist is Christian, and then the other proto-existentialist is atheist. So Nietzsche is an atheist, and not just an atheist, but one of his most famous quotes is "God is dead and we have killed him." So Nietzsche tries to come up with a system of morality for a godless world. There's no God left, so what is our ethics? What is good and what is bad? Well, Nietzsche thought that all previous systems of morality were made by weak people to justify their own lack of power. So the crowd was actually the herd. In a godless world, there's no meaning, so it would fall to a strong man or an Uberman, which literally means an overman, to recognize it, to embrace that, and to create his own morality. So when an Uberman interprets his actions, he can only interpret them with regards to his own created morality. So to illustrate this, I've taken a page from one of my favorite comics of all time, Watchmen, by Alan Moore, and here we have Dr. Manhattan, who with superpowers is basically a god, and he is the Overman. These tiny humans are running before him, and he's creating these explosions and whatever. He's created his own morality. No one can enforce a system morality over Dr. Manhattan. All right, it's really a great comic. Read it if you haven't read it. Don't watch the movie because it's not nearly as good as the comic. All right, done.
Why is Manhattan? Is the Manhattan
Yeah, after the Manhattan Project.
Okay,
that's the idea.
Okay,
he receives his powers during the Manhattan Project.
Got it.
Yes.
所以当然尼采的哲学中有很重要的观点，就是所谓的兽群观点。那他说我们世界的道德呢，其实都是兽群建立起来的，是那些或者说没有特别显著的自由意志的人，为了让自己的能力劣势或者说道德劣势不那么在这个世界上被凸显出来，而制造着一种弱者相扶持的哲学。而对于尼采来说，他需要一种强者的哲学。这种强者的哲学当然是某种意义上对于萨特来说非常自发的、非常自律的，或者说自己建立法律或者道德律令的这样子的一种哲学。所以我们看到就是尼采在对于人群或者对于兽群的厌恶，这一点萨特当然是继承下来的。
All right, good stuff. So existentialism. So we take the subjective truth of Kierkegaard, the moral choices, and focus on actions of Nietzsche, and then we apply them to everyone. No longer just Christians, no longer just Ubermensch, everyone. So we all become Ubermensch, and we all have to realize we create our own meaning in a meaningless world, and our own morality in a moralless world. We choose our lives and our paths. It's like we're forging, a path through the jungle. This is us. We have to choose our path. Yeah, so that's existentialism. I think that's reasonably clear. Then let's go on. Last part of the class, always everyone's favorite, where we read the existentialists. So l'existentialisme, how did they argue? L'existentialisme est en humanisme. This is a 1946 philosophical work by Sartre, originally given as a speech and then as an essay, and it literally means existentialism is a humanism. And so what that means in simpler English we'll cover. So it's the earliest complete, succinct formulation of existentialism. So it's pretty quick, it's easy to understand, and it explains what existentialism is, which is why we'll cover it. Sartre, later in his life, wasn't quite so keen on what he said here, but it's still a very important work. By the way, speaking of Sartre, it's not the most flattering photo of him, so I do apologize for that. All right, so the work starts off by outlining the four main criticisms that have been made against existentialism, because at this point it's pretty famous. So there are people talking about it and people criticizing it. First, it has been reproached as an invitation to people to dwell in quietism of despair. From another quarter, we are reproached for having underlined all that is ignominious in the human situation, for depicting what is mean, sordid, or base, for the neglect of certain things that possess charm and beauty and belong to the brighter side of human nature. Both from this side and from the other, we are also reproached for leaving out of account solidarity of mankind and considering man in isolation. From the Christian side, we are reproached as people who deny the reality and seriousness of human affairs. For since we ignore the commandments of God and all values prescribed as eternal, nothing remains but what is strictly voluntary. So, in terms of our four criticisms, first, it promotes despair. So people say, nothing can happen, nothing good can ever happen, because nothing can ever really be accomplished. The second criticism is it looks at the worst parts of humanity rather than the best parts of humanity. The third, it looks only at isolation and doesn't realize solidarity. It doesn't realize all men are together. And then the fourth criticism of existentialists is it pretends that there are no values, and which means that nothing that anyone does can ever be judged. So these are the four main criticisms against existentialism.
Yeah, 所以就是萨特先处理我们在这边读到的萨特，他正在处理所谓的就是外界世界对于生存哲学的几个责难，那主要是两义的责难。这四个责难其实曲一同学已经很好列出来了，但是呢，大家看一下，就是其实这就是所背负受敌的这两面，一方面呢，当然是来源于人文主义者。我们知道前面萨特已经谈到了，比如说关于生存的absurdity，就是关于生存的无意义性，它让人很孤单、很绝望，让人必须永远做自己的选择。这对于人的生存呢，是不是一种减损，或者说是不是一种威胁，是不是一种诅咒呢？另一方面呢，对于基督徒来说，那其实呢，萨特的哲学又是非常不肯定于人的一种哲学，或者非常不肯定在神恩中生活着的人的一种哲学，因为他非常强调当下的那种非常非常绝望的，或者说非常即兴的道德选择，而这个道德选择呢，似乎 和社会背景，尤其是基督教的社会背景没有任何关系，因为它永远要排除人群、兽群，甚至是教会兽群们的影响。那这是来自所谓的世俗领域和教会领域的两种攻讦。
All right, cool. So first, Sartre is going to respond to the criticism existentialism focuses only on the evil side of human nature. So we all know how many common sayings can be quoted to this effect. They all mean much the same. You must not oppose the powers that be, must not fight against superior force, must not meddle in matters that are above your station, that any action not in accordance with some tradition is mere romanticism, or that any undertaking which has not the support of proven experience is foredoomed to frustration, that since experience has shown men to be invariably inclined to evil, there must be firm rules to restrain them, otherwise we shall have anarchy. It is, however, the people who are forever mouthing these dismal proverbs, and whenever they are told of some more or less repulsive action, say, how like human nature. So, in other words, so the same people who claim that existentialism only focuses on the evil side of human nature are the same people who deny the existence of the best parts of humanity. So innovation and the chance for voluntary goodness. So he's saying the same people who say existentialism is evil or focuses on evil these are the people who don't focus on the best parts of humanity, innovation and the chance for voluntary goodness. So who really is focusing on the evil side of human nature then? In terms of commentary on this, I want a better account for why they think existentialism only focuses on the evil side of human nature, because I don't really get how you could make that criticism of existentialism, but apparently they existed. So, Sartre's responding to them, but I don't really understand what this criticism means or where it comes from.
So, 首先萨特回应就是说，刚才我们说到在第二个节那里，就是说，因为人是一个无意义的存在，人也没有能够依赖这个社会的种种支持、这种道德的支持。那人似乎呢是处在一个非常非常低劣、非常痛苦的境地中。那访问者会认为生存哲学对于人的境地是不是描绘的太过悲观？萨特会反对说，那其实你们没有注意到，就是我把人置于这种绝望的、完全自主的、完全孤独的境地之后，人会有多少的力量？你们没有看见他们的自主性、他们的创新性、他们的自由意志发挥出来的那个时候的能量，这一切的一切你们都没有考虑到。虽然人是孤独的，但是人并不是死气沉沉的，在我的描绘的人的图景之下。OK， 我下面会大声一点的。I was not loud enough.
Yeah. All right. So this is because people misunderstand existentialism. This is why they make this mistake that's saying existentialism focuses only on evil. But according to Sartre, there's only one crucial belief. There's only one underlying belief of an existential. That is to say, the sum of the formulae and the qualities which made its production and the definition possible precedes its existence. The presence of such and such a paper knife or book is thus determined before my eyes. Thus, the conception of a man in the mind of God is comparable to that of the paper knife in the mind of the artisan. God makes man according to a procedure and a conception, exactly as the artisan manufactures a paper knife following a definition and a formula. Atheistic existentialism, of which I am a representative, declares with greater consistency that if God does not exist, there is at least one being whose existence comes before its essence, being which exists before it can be defined by any conception of it. That being is man, or as Heidegger Heidegger has it the human reality. What do we mean by saying that existence precedes essence? We mean that man first of all exists, encounters himself, searches up in the world, and defines himself afterwards. So, to translate, so a paper knife, so a knife to cut paper, is made by its creator to cut things. It's a sum of, how you make a paper knife, and the existence of paper and of metal and of wood. That's made by, that's a paper knife. You need something to create paper or to cut paper, and then something comes into existence to cut paper. So Christians say the same thing about man. Man is made by God for some sort of purpose. He has a way of creating men. He has a purpose for creating men, and then God creates man. An atheist, existentialist, like Sartre, says God does not exist. Therefore, man comes into being with no purpose, with no real reality to him. So when he says existence precedes essence, so we're born, we see ourselves, and then we define ourselves. But we're born first. When we're born, we're not, we don't have any purpose. So, how much you like this in terms of commentary? How much you like this depends on how much you feel this, I think. Because it's imprecise. Men can't be anything. You can't be a bicycle. You can't be a dog. You can't choose to be a koala, no matter how cute koalas are. And by the way, this in French this says "hello, friends," so it is a cute koala. But unfortunately, you can't choose to be a koala. So it's imprecise, and how much you agree with Sartre here depends on how okay you are with him being imprecise. So I think that's both a weakness and possibly a strength of existentialism.
所以现在萨特开始回应基督教对于萨特的存在主义的一个攻击。对于基督教的伦理学家来说，人当然是通过神恩、通过上帝来定义的。就像为什么要在这个世界上实现一些更好的计划、更好的，比如说福利，像天国一样的东西，就是因为神先爱了世人。那这个世界呢，因为神的爱，当然要走向一个更好的未来。对于沙特来说，这完完全全是一个扯淡的事情。沙特会说，人完全没有为了一个更好的世界而生存。谁说人的生存存在就是为了一个更好的社会呢？他首先是为了自己的存在。所以呢，刚才 Trevor 也问到了，就是在多大程度上你们认为萨特的存在主义就是这种很个人主义的任意性，它的正当性有多少？这是大家自己的问题，然后对于存在主义者来说，最重要的当然是并不是神的存在，而是人在这个世界上首先存在。就像海德格尔所谈到的人的真实的处境一样，所以我想大家在这里不知道清楚没有？因为在神存在的情况下，人就是被作为神的计划中的一个工具，或者说某种意义上，对于萨特来说，像是一个工具一样被使用。其实，比如说要实现一个更好的人间的机构，那神呢，其实在用每个人来完成神的一个计划，而对萨特来说，这种计划完全不存在，只有每个人给每个人自己编造计划。大家清楚了吗？
Does Sartre mean existentialism is neutral on ethics when he debates for himself against the critique? Let's hold that for a second, because Sartre will talk about ethics So I think we're gonna have an answer to that. That's a good question, but let's hold off on it. All right, and so let us continue. So Sartre says, "Don't be confused about how we choose, though. For what we usually understand by wishing or willing is a conscious decision taken, much more often than not, after we have made ourselves what we are. I may wish to join a party, to write a book, or to marry. But in such case, what is usually called my will is probably a manifestation of a prior and more spontaneous decision." So Sartre says, often when you think you're choosing, it's something you've actually already chosen before. After you decided who you are, you've already made your decision. And you didn't come to it through reason, you came to it through feeling or emotion, which you didn't even realize. So in terms of commentary, the cynical side of me says this is a way for Sartre to argue against people who say there are parts of me that I didn't choose, that I didn't choose every part of me. Sartre says, well, yes, you did. You just didn't know that you did. So that's the cynical side of me. But there does seem to be something where, you might think you chose to marry, but really, long ago, you chose to be someone who would marry. So it is an interesting distinction.
Yeah. 然后在这里萨特谈到，就是有时候我们觉得自己似乎在做一些选择，但是呢，萨特说，其实这个选择并没有大家看起来的那么自由。其实，在你选择自己成为什么人、什么样的人的时候，你已经这些日常的选择就已经被大部分的确定下来了。所以呢，人万不在枷锁之中。
All right, good stuff. So, our choices are also more complex than they appear. So our responsibility is thus much greater than we had supposed, for it concerns mankind as a whole. If I am a worker, for instance, I may choose to join a Christian rather than a communist trade union. And if by that membership I choose to signify that resignation is, after all, the attitude that best becomes a man, that man's kingdom is not upon this earth, I do not commit myself alone to that view. Resignation is my will for everyone, and my action is, in consequence, a commitment on behalf of all mankind. Or to take a more personal case, I decide to marry and to have children, even though this decision proceeds simply from my situation, from my passion or my desire. I am thereby committing not only myself, but humanity as a whole to the practice of monogamy. I am thus responsible for myself and for all men. And I'm creating a certain image of man as I would have him to be. In fashioning myself, I fashion man. So this is weirdly like Kant. He says, I can choose to join a union, whether it's Christian or communist, or I can resign, or I can marry. But whatever I do, I'm saying this is what everyone should do. This is a commitment on behalf of all mankind. And this is very similar to Kant's, kingdom of ends. Each action, you're saying what everyone should do. The weird thing is that Sartre doesn't defend this, and he doesn't mention Kant. So it's actually really, this is a weird part for me, because I don't know why he says this, because he doesn't defend it at all. And I wish he had mentioned Kant, because then at the very least I'd understand where Sartre was coming from. But as it is, he just says this. He basically says Kant's kingdom of ends without ever mentioning Kant, which does seem like a strange decision, to say that every time you make a choice, it's like you're making that choice on behalf of all humanity. Anyways, done.
对，所以萨特这里有一个非常神秘的一个图景，其实某种程度上也是在我看来也是萨特为了解决他的伦理学过度个人主义的一个阐释。就是萨特说呢，其实呢，我们做一个选择的时候，并不仅仅是在为我们个人，我的意思是做一个负责的选择的时候，并不是仅仅在为我们自己做选择。当我们在积极的思考人性应该是怎么样的时候，比如说就应该是一夫一妻制的时候，我其实是在帮整个人类做选择。在如下的意义上，就是我的人性其实也是这个世界的人性的一部分。在我做一个很强的选择，然后做出了某些相应的伦理行为的时候，我就在很大的程度上定义了人性应该是怎么样的。就像萨特他自己，他写书，他影响了这么多人，他事实上对人性的定义，也某种程度上改变了这个世界很多。在这个意义上，我做出的选择，其实就是对人性的在人类历史上的一次重新的塑造和定义。
All right. So these choices have emotional consequences, these big choices. So this may enable us to understand what is meant by such terms, perhaps a little grandiloquent, as anguish, abandonment, and despair. As you will soon see, it is very simple. First, what do we mean by anguish? The existentialist frankly states that man is in anguish. His meaning is as follows. When a man commits himself to anything, fully realizing that he is not only choosing what he will be, but is thereby at the same time a legislator deciding for the whole of mankind, such a moment a man cannot escape from the sense of complete and profound responsibility. There are many indeed who show no such anxiety. We affirm that they are merely disguising their anguish or in flight from it. So because we realize we're saying what everyone should do, whenever we make a choice, that's when we're in anguish. So you feel this real sense of anxiety when you're like, what should I do, considering this is something that I'm saying everyone should do in my position. So in terms of commentary, I think it works if you felt this. Like, I think it's really a feeling. If you feel this sort of anguish and anxiety of like, what should I do? Then I think it really makes sense. If you haven't, then it doesn't. And I think that that's sort of a weakness of Sartre is I have had friends who legitimately do not think like this. I tend to be someone who like agonizes over decisions, but I have friends who just make decisions and just don't really care. And they're like, yeah, sure, I whatever. And Sartre like refuses to acknowledge that people can feel like that, but some do. They tend not to take philosophy classes, but some do. So I think this is a weakness of Sartre. But
所以萨特继续重复他的刚才的论点，就是人在做出真的原初的或者说本真的选择的时候，人其实在某种意义上在定义整个人性应该是怎么样的。在这个时候呢，这是一种非常自发、非常负责的一个人类的活动。他说有些人呢，他其实并没有感觉到痛苦。就像刚才 Trevor 说的，很多他的朋友在选择的时候经常不感觉到痛苦。那对于萨特来说呢，其实他们是活在一个异化的世界里，所以呢，这种痛苦呢，只是被掩藏或者说被延迟了起来而已。
all right. So that was anguish. Now abandonment comes when we realize God doesn't exist, so neither does good. So the existentialist, on the contrary, finds it extremely embarrassing that God does not exist, for there disappears with him all possibility of finding values in an intelligible heaven. There can no longer be any good a priori, since there is no infinite and perfect consciousness to think it. It is nowhere written that the good exists, that one must be honest or must not lie, since we are now upon the plane where there are only men. Dostoevsky once wrote, if God did not exist, everything would be permitted. And that for existentialism is the starting point. Everything is indeed permitted if God does not exist, and man is in consequence forlorn, for he cannot find anything to depend upon either within or outside himself. He discovers forthwith that he is without excuse. For if indeed existence precedes essence, one will never be able to explain one's action by reference to a given and specific human nature. In other words, there is no determinism. Man is free, man is freedom. So without God, there's no good. You can do anything. Everything's permitted, and you won't be punished or rewarded for what you do. So you have freedom. We all have freedom. Nothing is determining us, nothing is judging us, and there's nothing we can rely on besides ourselves.
But qualified freedom, yeah, because you have to take some responsibility in defining the humanity. If God doesn't do that, Sartre would say, okay, that's you who is going to define the humanity, so it's not an absolute freedom. So somehow qualifies that.
And which
Yeah.
do you mean? Yeah. So he's saying that there's no human nature. There's no determinism. There's no punishment. There's no reward. So in the sense that man is free, in the sense that you can do whatever you want without fear or without hope of consequences.
Yeah, I'm trying to defend Sartre against the accusation of his like arbitrariness. It's somehow hard, but
Oh, okay, yeah.
I do the translation. So, yeah，对于肖特来说，就是当然我们知道妥耶陀斯夫斯基，Hello， 妥耶陀夫斯基的很重要的一个声称就是，如果没有上帝，一切皆可能。那对于上帝来说，对于萨特来说，最重要的事情是，其实没有上帝才是一切的开始。如果没有上帝了，人才能通过自己的存在来定义自己，人才能够负责的做出一切的选择，包括定义人性这样的选择。所以呢，正是因为没有上帝，所以人类的责任才可能开始，并且人类的自由才可能开始。这个自由并不是一个非常任意的自由，而是在萨特意义上的自由，就是说，相对于我们是被我们的社会责任，比如说是被一个好医生，或者说是被一个好男人这样子奇奇怪怪的所谓的本质的也好，特征的也好的外在特征外在的属性来定义的，我们人呢，首先是要被自己的负责任的存在定义的。
So Sartre would say you're still free in China, even if there's no God. He's not saying that there's no such thing as policemen. He's not saying no one's going to put you in jail. He's just saying nothing's determined. There might be consequences from your other human beings, but there are no eternal consequences, and there's no one to say what's really good and what's really bad. So, you can still throw rocks at a policeman if you want. You're going to be put in jail and probably be beaten by the policeman, but there's nothing stopping you from throwing rocks at a policeman.
Yeah, it's a very good version of positive freedom instead of negative freedom.
Yeah.
Actually, if there's policeman, it's a better environment where you can exert your freedom because you can make your real choice here.
That's an interesting point. So let's cover that when we get to Locke, and we can talk about some natural rights. Yeah. We can talk about why policemen exist in the first place. All right. So to finish it up, second to last one, our ethics are not only shown by our actions, but determined by our actions, which is a pretty weird statement. So let's look at this. So Sartre discusses a young man, a student of his, who is trying to decide whether to take care of his sick mother or to go off and fight the Nazis. Moreover, as Gita has very well said, a sentiment which is play acting and one which is vital are two things that are hardly distinguishable one from another. To decide that I love my mother by staying beside her, to play a comedy, the upshot of which is that I do so, these are nearly the same things. In other words, feeling is formed by the deeds that one does, therefore I cannot consult it as a guide to action. That is to say, I can neither seek within myself for an authentic impulse to action, nor can I expect from some ethic formulae that will enable me to act. You may say that the youth did at least go to a professor to ask for advice, but if you seek counsel from a priest, for example, you have selected that priest, and at bottom you already knew more or less what he would advise. In other words, to choose an advisor is nevertheless to commit oneself by that choice. So, to translate, our feelings seem to guide our actions, but really our actions guide our feelings. So we're never swept along by our feelings, but we choose them. Even when we resign our fate to someone else, like a priest or a professor, we are choosing our fate. We're choosing to resign our fate. So this seems quite counterintuitive. So I can certainly see why Sartre says our actions show our feelings, but it does seem strange to say our actions completely determine our feelings. And that goes along with his account of asking advice. I don't think you already know what someone would say before you ask advice. I mean, sometimes you do, but not always. So it seems like an extreme statement on Sartre's part. But it does certainly fits in with his overall worldview. All right.
所以萨特在这里他做出了一个判断，就是回应了我们之前的问题：为什么谈论存在、谈论生存这样形而上学的问题是一个伦理学的问题？对于萨特来说，没有伦理学和形而上学之间的区分。当我们在谈论哲学的时候，一切的哲学我们就在谈论，我们实际上是在谈论我们的行为，就像谈论我们爱我们的母亲的时候，我们其实不能谈论别的爱，除了说我们在陪伴他，或者说在他生病的时候守在他身边。那对于萨特来说呢，就是一切的哲学应该都应该划归到行动上，这是萨特的一个非常强烈的一个伦理学的一个initiative. Yeah.
All right. So last thing, and I know we're running a little short on time, but time always seems to be the enemy. All right. Lastly, our despair comes from knowing the world which we rely on is ultimately beyond our control. Despair is relinquishing that control. As for despair, the meaning of this expression is extremely simple. It merely means that we limit ourselves to reliance upon that which is within our wills, within the sum of the probabilities which render our action feasible. Whenever one wills anything, there are always these elements of probability. If I'm counting upon a visit from a friend who may be coming by train or by tram, presuppose that the train will arrive at the appointed time, that the tram will not be derailed. Remain within the realm of possibilities, but one does not rely upon any possibilities beyond those that are strictly concerned in one's action. Beyond the point at which the possibilities under consideration cease to affect my action, I ought to disinterest myself. For there is no God and no prevenient design which can adapt the world and all its possibilities to my world. When Descartes said, "Conquer yourself rather than the world," what he meant at bottom the same, that we should act without hope. So, translation, we have to know that our actions depend on certain things outside our control. If there's something that doesn't affect our actions and it is not under our control, we have to make ourselves not care. We need to act without hoping things will be good. So in terms of my last commentary, Sartre's definition of hope, acting without hope, seems to be the belief that God will help us in the world. If we define that hope is just an admittedly groundless belief that something good will happen, instead of saying, I know something good will happen, just be like, I hope something good will happen. It'd be nice. It makes me wonder if Sartre would say we still need to abandon all hope. because that would seem to be my definition of hope at the least. But all right, John, last translation.
Yeah，就是对于萨特来说，就是一种在行为中的一种全局性的指导，其实是没有必要，也是没有可能的。我们就回到了萨特所谓的本真的选择的这样一个概念上，就是这种选择它永远是一种非常非常强的专注于当下的一种非常自发的抉择。对于萨特来说，我们要活在每一刻的这样的抉择中，不要对事先事后的事情瞻前顾后想的太多，因为实际上就是人不会有全责性的知识的掌握，人也不可能依靠这样全责性的知识的掌握做出什么负责的选择。对于萨特来说，唯一可以相信的，当然就是当下的生存的这些抉择。
All right. So that concludes our outline. Existentialism is argued impassioned. He has a lot of feelings and he conveys them well. And it's deductively, but the definitions and assumptions are pretty questionable. So in the end, a lot of it is based on feelings. He tries to invoke certain feelings and argues from those feelings. So, conclusion. Existentialism has its place historically as an important movement, and it has its place philosophically because it's an attempt to come up with a life philosophy. We are living in a world with a much broader array of possibilities open to us than our ancestors had. My ancestors could only be farmers, and this is actually a picture of an Irish peasant's cottage in 1846. So this is something similar to what my ancestors likely lived in. And meanwhile, I can teach philosophy to you lovely people over the internet. This is a much broader array of possibilities open to me than my ancestors ever had. So existentialism has to be commended as a modern philosophy and as a philosophy which tries to guide us in the minute complexities which make up day-to-day life. All these little choices and whatever that we have to go through day by day. And this is something which other ethical philosophies we've studied are lacking in. They don't tell us how to make all these choices which are neither moral or immoral. How do we go about our lives? So this is something which existentialism has. But it doesn't have enough proof to survive beyond its moment. There's just so many things asserted which there's really no reason to believe. So existentialism as an academic philosophy, as something discussed seriously in universities, dies before the 21st century, although it's still incredibly popular in high schools and literature and whatever. It just dies out in academic philosophy. So you'll probably actually come across it more in a literature class than you ever would in a philosophy class. I think it's still important to know, though, and if you like it, it could even be important to follow. It certainly made an impact on me when I first read it, when I was, 14, 15. But next class, we're going to go back to our normal ethical concerns with everyone's favorite radical vegetarian, utilitarian, Peter Singer, and we'll also close out how to live. So it'll be a good time. Always good for discussion. All right. So that is that. Thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson on existentialism. Yeah. Classes coming, ending pretty soon, which is a little frightening.
Yeah, the ethical part is such a short part.
It is. Yeah. John, what do you think of existentialism?
No, I'm not that young anymore, and my heart doesn't beat left anymore. Yeah, but it's very interesting because we are going to unionize in the next month, the graduate students
Oh, wow.
are. So sometimes I'm put in the same situation better because I'm trying to be active in that process, especially among the Chinese students. But the questions are upon you. What the hell is a union? It's really good at the end, but nobody knows everything. You can only make a very, very existential choice somehow.
You're unionizing the Chinese students.
No, not the Chinese. The graduate students are
So
unionizing
including the Chinese students.
including the Chinese students,
Wow.
but Chinese students like 30%, very crucial part. If they vote no, it's almost
Yeah.
gone. So yeah, it's
Man.
hard. Man, if you could tell me a bit more, what is a union? What's union like here?
Oh, that's a big topic.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
Yeah. All right. Let's cover unions later.
Later, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, homework is uploaded. So you guys have the chance to engage with existentialism on your own bounds. If any of you are still doing midterm exams, best of luck, and I will see you Wednesday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.